morning, everybody. Come on out. Good morning, everybody. All right. So my name is Mike Anderson. How many people have never seen me speak before? Just raise your hands. Okay, so let me just give you a couple of my background real quickly. My name is Mike Anderson. I'm a second-generation shop owner. Grew up in the business. My dad was a body technician, so I grew up every summer working for my father. Graduated high school, went in the United States military. While I was in the military, I went to college to get a degree in accounting, and after that time, I got out of the military, got out of college. My dad had a chance to purchase part of the body shop he was working at. So I came back to work with my dad and was working in the back as a technician. One day, their manager quit. He said, Mike, would you go up front and help us write estimates? How many of you ever heard that saying, ignorance is bliss before? Raise your hands. Everybody say, ignorance is bliss for me, please. Ignorance is bliss. Let's say it again. Yes, ignorance was bliss in my case because I didn't have anybody to brainwash me and tell me what would work and what wouldn't work. So what I did is I quickly jumped into it, started running the shop for my dad. Eventually I had the opportunity to buy the company from my dad and his partners. In 2002, I opened up a second shop. In 2005, a third shop. We were all aluminum Audi certified for Allen, had a great for Audi of America. We were factory trained for several OEMs, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. About 6 years ago, I had the opportunity to sell my businesses, and I sold them. Moved to Hawaii, lived there for about a year and a half. My mom passed away, unfortunately, so I moved back to the mainland where I live at today, outside of Washington, D.C., to be closer to my father. So I have a company today called Collision Advice. I have been on the road over 300 days a year, every year for the past 5 years. Last year I was on the road 347 days. That means I was home less than 2 days a month, right? So that makes me really good boyfriend material, right? So at the end of the day, I travel a ton. I was in 47 states, every province in Canada last year, in 4 countries. So I don't really know that much. I just get to see a lot, and I'm here to share my passion with you. So a couple ground rules. Number one, if you believe in something I say today, I want you to say amen. All right? So for example, if I was to go right over here and I was to look at Mr. Jeffries and I are both becoming members of the Morehead Club because we're starting to get more head than hair, what would y'all say? Amen, right? But if you disagree with something today, I want you to call me out on it. Just say, hogwash, Mike, that doesn't work. Last but not least is I have something that's called Tourette's syndrome. Does anybody know what Tourette's is? Raise your hands, please. So I have Tourette's. That means God made me a little differently. Sometimes I twitch my neck, and sometimes I actually grab my crotch. So I just want to let you know that so I don't offend anybody, and let's just get that out of the way. Are we all good? If so, give me an amen. All right, good deal. So let's go ahead and jump into this. So here's my opinion. My opinion is that for a collision repair shop to thrive in the future, and not just survive, but to thrive, to actually win, to do well, they need to focus on what we call the three-legged stool metaphor. And that means that every leg of a business, to be successful, you need to focus on 3 parts. The first is sales and marketing, number 2 is production, and the third is finance and HR. So for a shop of the future to thrive and not just survive, they got to put equal attention to each part of the business. So the first one we're going to talk about is sales and marketing. So I was at a conference last year, the Verifex conference, if anybody's familiar with that. And then I was also at another conference called the Steel Manufacturers Conference in Michigan. And there were several OEM manufacturers there. And one of the things that one of the OEMs sat up on a stage and said, and they described an experience. They said, here's the deal. A year and a half, 2 years from now, you're going to be driving down the road. And you're going to have an accident. And when you have an accident, what's going to happen is that car is going to notify the OEM manufacturer that you've been in an accident. And what's going to happen is that OEM is then going to have a voice that comes over the car, much like, think OnStar on steroids, and it's going to say, Mr. Friesen, your car's notified us you've been in an accident. Are you okay? And Mr. Friesen will say yes. And they'll say, Mr. Friesen, would you like us to send an emergency medical technician, EMT, or the police to the scene of the accident? He'll be like, I don't need that. Police would be great. And then they're going to say, Mr. Friesen, your car has notified us that it's not drivable. Your airbags have deployed, the headlights are out, and your radiator's leaking antifreeze. Therefore, your vehicle's going to need to be towed. Do you have a towing service in mind, Mr. Friesen? And Mr. Friesen's going to say, no, I do not. And they're going to say, Mr. Friesen, would you like us to send a towing service for you within the next 7 to 10 minutes? That would be great. Mr. Friesen, do you have a body shop in mind? No, I do not. Mr. Friesen, are you still at 555-1212? Yes, I am. Mr. Friesen, how about if we text you the list of our certified shops within a 30-mile radius, as well as their online reviews, and then you can choose a shop and we'll have your car delivered there. We will also work with Enterprise Rent-A-Car to have your rental car there for you, ready when you drop off your vehicle, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Now see, right now the way the current claims process works is you wreck your car, you call your insurance company and they say, do you have a car a shop in mind. And if you say yes, then that's where you go. If you say no, then they will refer you to a DRP shop. If you're a DRP, you call it a referral. If you're not a DRP, you call it steering, amen? Right? So it depends on what side of the coin you're on. And at FNOL, first notice of loss, that's what happens. Ladies and gentlemen, the collision repair industry in the future, the OEM is going to be taking that FNOL, that first notice of loss. So now when I saw this at this conference, I was like, I don't know about this. That sounds a little far-fetched, right? And then they played a video. Would y'all like to see the video? Right, would y'all like to see the video? Yeah. All right, don't get an attitude. All right, here we go.
Mr. Williams, this is Vehicle Services. We've been notified of a collision event. Are you okay?
I'm fine. Just a little fender bender.
Should we send EMS and police to the scene?
No EMS, but the police would be great.
Well, we've notified the police of the incident and your location, and they're on the way. We've also received a diagnostic report from your vehicle. It appears your car will not be drivable from the scene. Would you like for us to make arrangements for pickup?
Yes, that would be great.
All right, we're sending to your phone our 3 certified repair centers closest to you. Do you have it?
Yes, I just got it.
If you will, just choose one and we'll have the vehicle delivered there for damage assessment.
Great. I guess all that's left for me is to call my insurance company?
No, sir, Mr. Williams. I've got your insurance information on file, and I've already notified them of your loss and where we'll be taking the vehicle. I've got your claim information, and I'm sending it to your phone now. They'll be in touch with you soon regarding your claim. I've also let the repair center know that the car's on its way, along with a copy of the vehicle self-assessment of damage. This has generated an initial parts order, and they're en route to the facility as well. In addition, I've taken care of your rental car. It's waiting for you at the shop.
Thank you. It's so great to have your help. I don't know how I would have made those decisions.
You're welcome, Mr. Williams. That's why I'm here. Would you like me to stay on the phone until the police arrive? Should I notify anybody that you might be late for an appointment?
No, thanks. I'm fine. But you could call my wife and save me from breaking the bad news about her car.
Now, I got to tell you, after I saw that video, I was like, is this really real? Is this really going to happen? So I reached out to some OEM counterpart friends that I have in the U.S., and I asked them, and they said, Mike, absolutely, that's going to be in the near future. Now, at this one discussion I was actually at this one conference, there were several insurers and OEMs up on a stage. And when they started talking about this, one of the insurers actually started laughing. And one of the OEMs actually called him out on stage and said, what do you think so funny? He said, well, if you think it's going to be really easy to build a network of shops and build all these shops and process claims, go ahead and do it. And one of the OEMs said, sir, we've actually been doing that over in Europe for almost 3 years. And then the insurance person got very silent. So then my next question was, I reached out to some insurance friends of mine, and I said, is this really for real? And several of my insurance friends said, Mike, that's coming. We're actually in dialogues right now with OEMs about becoming their preferred carriers. So then the question became why do the OEMs want to get so involved in the collision repair industry? And everybody said, well, they want to sell more parts. And we said, well, there's probably some truth to that. And then a young lady by the name of Erica Schaefer from Chrysler, who got the statistic from Assured Performance Network, shared this statistic with me, and I thought it was very interesting. And that was this: 60% of all consumers who have to return their car back to a body shop for a problem, paint doesn't match, door handle didn't work, molding fell off, whatever that problem looks like, right? No matter how minor, 60% of them will sell or trade their car in within 1 year. And 63% of that 60% will change vehicle brands. So they'll change from a Honda to a Toyota, from a Mercedes to an Audi. Ladies and gentlemen, why do the OEMs want to get involved in the industry? To protect their brand. Everybody say it out loud with me, please. Protect their brand. Say it again. Say it again. Ladies and gentlemen, every single entity in this industry wants to protect their brand. If you're a shop, you want to protect your brand. If you're an insurance carrier, you want to protect your brand. Ladies and gentlemen, it's the same thing with the OEMs. They need to protect their brand. So it's going to be very, very critical. So in my opinion, And by the way, in the US, we actually coined a term from this. And a guy named Rick Turry from Autotex is actually the one that came up with the term, and they call it virtual steering. Everybody say those two words out loud with me, please. Virtual steering. Let's say it again. So virtual steering, think OnStar on steroids. So ladies and gentlemen, here's what I'll tell you. In order for a shop to thrive and not just survive, in the old days it was you were DRP or you were OEM certified, right? It was either or. Today, to be successful, ladies and gentlemen, you need to be a blend of both. You're going to have to be a blend of both to thrive and not just survive in the collision repair industry. But due to some of the cost of these certification programs, ladies and gentlemen, you're going to make intelligent decisions. And that's why you need to align yourself with someone that helps you to understand demographics for how many vehicles, makes, and models of that specific type or in your specific area to determine which OEM certifications to pursue. Now, here's the next thing I think a shop's going to have to do to thrive and not just survive. They're going to have to focus on the 3 C's. And I borrowed this from my friends at CarStar, right? And that is the 3 C's is CSI, closing ratio, and cycle time. Everybody say those 3 things out loud with me, please. CSI. Ladies and gentlemen, if you want to thrive in the future, you want to win, you need to focus on these. CSI, a couple key things, kept informed. Ladies and gentlemen, we have to keep those customers informed. The best way to do that is every single day. And what's the next thing we need to do is ask that customer, what is your preferred method of communication? So we understand how they want to be kept informed. Text message, email, or phone call. By the way, 68% of all consumers prefer to receive a text message update, approximately 10% via email, and the rest were phone calls. But ask the customer. Number 2, assignment received, estimate upload. Everybody needs to start focusing on that, right? Insurers have found there's a direct correlation between the time they send you an assignment at first service of loss to a DRP shop versus the time it takes you to start that estimate with a customer. And the longer that takes, the more the insurance companies see a direct correlation with what they pay out on bodily injury claims. So if your shop is taking 7 days or 6 days to get in touch with a customer when you receive an assignment to write that estimate, ladies and gentlemen, you're hurting their brand. So that's why you see a lot of your MSOs moving to call centers, and some of those call centers are getting in touch with a customer best in class times of 7 minutes. An assignment received estimate start date, you want that to be less than 1.6 days. The other thing, ladies and gentlemen, that affects our CSI is on-time delivery. Are you delivering the vehicle on time as promised? And what's the number one reason why we don't deliver vehicles on time as promised is because we give them inaccurate information the day they drop off their vehicle. And we have to change our word track. Because when I tell you your car's going to be done in 3 or 4 days, what do you hear? What do you hear? If I say your car's going to be done Thursday or Friday, what are you going to hear? Ladies and gentlemen, we have to stop the madness. How can we give a customer a delivery date or a promise date when you have not done 100% disassembly, you have not researched parts availability, and you don't have 100% insurance authorization? So we have to change our word track. And what that's going to look like is when Ms. DeVito comes in, I'm going to be like, Ms. DeVito, once we get your vehicle in, we dismantle it, we itemize out all the additional damage, and we get 100% insurance approval and find out the parts availability. We will then let you know via your preferred method of communication the approximate delivery date of your vehicle. I never gave them a date when it was going to be done. Does that make sense to everybody? Give me an amen. Ladies and gentlemen, on-time delivery. What's the second thing that hits that is scheduling. Ladies and gentlemen, if you want to thrive and not just survive, insurance and shops and OEMs, we got to get together on scheduling. According to Enterprise Rent-A-Car, about 63% of all vehicles are dropped off on a Monday. Stop the madness. Do I get an amen? Amen. That stuff makes me want to twitch my neck and grab my crotch. I'm going to just tell you that right now, right? Ladies and gentlemen, stop the madness. You've got to get with your rental car companies and you got to start tracking statistical data for what percentage of vehicles come in Monday through Saturday and what our length of rental is by those days. And we've got to start having consistent delivery for scheduling. And last but not least, we got to understand repair planning. And last but not least, ladies and gentlemen, was the vehicle fixed right the first time? Here's the deal. You can do a $20,000 repair. But if I'm driving home and my Bluetooth doesn't work on my dash, I'm going to give you a bad CSI. And I'm also going to tell you that you didn't fix my vehicle properly. And that hurts everyone's brand. OEM, insurers, and shops. And we'll talk about that momentarily. Number 2, closing ratio. Ladies and gentlemen, we got to figure out how to get those people in our shops quicker when we receive those assignments. And that's we need to build sales scripts, and we need to do role playing with our employees, and we have to do it after hours. Great organizations practice during practice. They play the game during the game. We also have to make sure we do corporate espionage. Ladies and gentlemen, you want to thrive and not just survive, you got to know what your competitors are doing. You got to know what they're doing good, you got to know what they're doing bad, you got to know what they're doing ugly. And you got to do a SWOT analysis. What are your strengths, what are your weaknesses, where are your opportunities, and where are your threats? Number 3, cycle time. Ladies and gentlemen, speed is the name of the game. I can tell you in the United States, we have never seen less of an emphasis on severity than what we do today. I will tell you in the United States of America, we have never seen less of an emphasis on severity than we do today. Now, I never said insurers don't care about severity, but I said there's less of an emphasis. Why? Because it's about three things: service, speed, and accuracy, and we'll talk about that momentarily. Ladies and gentlemen, if you wanted to thrive in the United States of America, a year ago I would have told you that you need to be fixing cars 2 days faster than Enterprise's length of rental arms report, than your market average. Today, if you want to thrive and not just survive, you need to be 4 days faster. You've got to be fixing cars 4 days faster than what the other shops are in your market area. Now, everybody says, well, Mike, if you fix cars faster, you're hacking them out. That's a lie. Keep telling yourself that lie right out of business. Because bottom line is, if you're working a team system, you understand repair planning, and you understand scheduling and pull production, ladies and gentlemen, you will kill it when it comes to cycle time. Next thing, production. In my opinion, the shops of the future, in order to thrive and not just survive, need to be retaining a 65 to 70% gross profit unloaded without benefits. A shop in the future is not going to be able to invest in equipment and training for OEM certifications if they do not retain more gross profit. It's not going to be possible, ladies and gentlemen. It is not. Spot welders are going to become like computers. Every 2 to 3 years, they're going to become obsolete. So you might as well figure I'm planning on stroking a check for spot welders, for $30-some thousand like every 2 years. Why? Because the way vehicle designs and structures are changing. So ladies and gentlemen, you must focus on retaining more gross profit for your shop. Now, how's that going to be accomplished? Number one is through the bonus-based play plans. Those days of the same technician working on the same vehicle start to finish, those days are gone. You've got to have more hands-on car. You've got to turn those cars quicker. You got to go to bonus-based pay plans, so when you achieve a certain amount of gross profit, then they get commission based off of that. We got to start looking at different tiers of employees. You got A-techs, B-techs, and C-techs, and we got to look at more repair versus replace opportunities. I will absolutely tell you, ladies and gentlemen, the shops of the future, in order to thrive and not just survive, are going to have to maintain 70% plus GP on labor. And insurance carriers, I mean this in love. Understand, the intent of my heart is I want every single person in this room to win. The intent of my heart is I want you to be successful. Everybody in this room, not just shops. But insurers, it's going to mean in some cases some labor rate increases. Why? Because it's the only way they're going to be able to afford some of the equipment that's going to be required to fix these vehicles. Here's the other thing. I will also tell you the biggest challenge for everybody, MSOs, single shop owners, is employees, finding technicians. How people right now, you're having a hard time finding employees? Raise your hands. Raise your hands up high. Give yourself another year and you're going to have more employees than you know what to do with. You know why? Because depending on who becomes the president of the United States, we're all going to move our asses to Canada. Let me just tell you that right now, all right? We're going to rush your borders. Telling you, we're coming. We're coming. There's 32 of us here today. This isn't by accident. We planned this shit, all right? We're coming to take over, right? At the end of the day, ladies and gentlemen, as shops, we've got to start looking. I got to tell you, I'm all about doing a safe and proper repair. But at the end of the day, we're becoming an industry of parts replacers. And we've got to start looking for better repair versus replace opportunities. And we got to start looking at, especially on front and rear bumpers and headlights. All right? Here's the other thing I will tell you is jobbers and distributors here. You sell equipment, you sell paint, you've got to become a conduit of information for your customers. You've got to handle their blind spot, right? You got to be their wingman. What do you got to do? Share with them websites like this. Boron Extrication. This is a website that was built by firefighters in order to help educate first responders on where to cut out with Jaws of Life, because Jaws of Life won't cut through boron steel, right? So what happened is, this is a website. You go to it. You download their app. It's $40.99. You put in the make and model of the vehicle. It tells you every component's made out of boron. It's good for firefighters, but it's good for us when we're writing estimates, because boron can't be repaired. It must be replaced, and there's certain things we need to know, right? You've got to start helping your technicians and your estimators have the capability in order to access websites this. You got to look at another website, drivealuminum.org. I would encourage everybody in this room to subscribe to this. When I said everyone, that includes insurance carriers, right? Subscribe to this. Get their email newsletter emailed to you once a week. Understand what the latest and the greatest is. Another website, World Auto Seal. Subscribe to this. Another one is International Magnesium. Ladies and gentlemen, we need to spend, as an industry, we need to spend less time Facebook and Twitter and tweeting and all that other stuff, and we got to spend more time understanding what it takes to fix a car safely and properly. Do I get an amen? Amen. All right, good deal, good deal. Next thing, finance and HR. Ladies and gentlemen, data is and will always remain key. Body shops also, are, in my opinion, should be on accrual accounting, and they need to be understanding how to adjust their work in process each month. Why? Because we're going to have to become more business savvy than ever before. Why? So we can determine what our ROI is going to be if we need to invest in an alignment machine or aluminum equipment or OEM certification. Also, ladies and gentlemen, I will tell you, I hope that I'm wrong. I pray that I'm wrong. There have been times I was wrong. And I will admit it. And I hope that I get asked back here again and I stand before you and say I was wrong. But in my personal opinion, ladies and gentlemen, I believe as shops, we're going to see our parts gross profits start to shrink, decline, and maybe even one day disappear. And that scares me. Why? Because more and more shops are price matching parts to avoid putting on aftermarket or used. And then when we see the whole GM thing we got going on in the U.S. with PartsLink, we know where there's no list price in the estimating system. Ladies and gentlemen, that's something to watch, right? Because if your part, you got to remember, parts is about 36 to 40% of your business. Let's say you're doing $1 million a year in business. That's $400,000 a year in parts. You lose 5% or 10% margin on that. That's $20,000 to $40,000 for every $1 million you do in sales. That's $20,000 to $40,000 net cash you lose out. Does everybody get that? If so, give me an amen. Ladies and gentlemen, that's got to be made up somewhere. It's got to come from someplace, right? At the end of the day, we have to have enough business, right? Enough money in order to be able to afford all these OEM certifications, etc. So I think it would be interesting that you need to start watching your parts gross profits. That's why, again, repair versus replace, as long as it's safe and proper repair. Here's the other thing. The biggest challenge for everybody is employees. So what do we need to do is the organizations are going to thrive and not just survive, are going to figure out how to get their employees from zero to hero as fast as possible. That means having after-hours training programs. Remember, practice during practice, play the game during the game. Develop training matrices that says, here's everything an estimator needs to learn how to do, a CSR, a parts person, a bookkeeper, a body tech, a paint tech, and then stick to that and rely on your partners to build that training matrix. The next thing is this. Here's what I found. Consumers are looking for three things when they choose an auto body shop. Consumers are looking for three things. You might want to write these down. Trust, empathy, and direction. Everybody say those things out loud with me, please. Trust. Empathy, come on, a little louder. Trust. Empathy, that's what consumers are looking for when they choose a body shop. Here's what's important to insurance carriers, everybody. Service, speed, and accuracy. Everybody say that out loud with me, please. Service. Ladies and gentlemen, the shops of the future that are going to thrive and not just survive, they need to focus on service. What do I mean by service? I mean off the hook, over the top, off the charts, extraordinary customer service, ladies and gentlemen. Good enough is not good enough. That means that CSR or that estimator that's sitting on their fat tush behind that counter, they need to get their butts up off that counter and walk around and greet that customer and act happy to see them. You got to remember, the average person coming to your shop wants to give you a check for $2,500 to $3,000. Get your ass up out of that chair, excuse my language, and act happy to see them. Do I get an amen? They want to give you money. You go to Outback Steakhouse, they open the door for you. You go to Walmart, they open the door for you. Ladies and gentlemen, we got to act happy to see people. With the way we greet them, we got to keep them informed every single day. Your employees need to be wearing uniforms. They got to have their logoed apparel. Ladies and gentlemen, you've got to have an extraordinary customer service experience, not just for the insurance carriers, but you're also representing that OEM brand if you are OEM certified. We got to remember, 63% of people prefer text message updates. If you don't have the ability to update a customer electronically in your business, you are already behind the ball. You're already losing the war in the game, ladies and gentlemen. We got to play to win. Delivering the vehicle. It's got to be a process. It's got to be a wow event. Are you going out with that customer when the vehicle gets delivered and you're going through all the functions with them? High beam, low beam, left turn signal, right turn signal. Mrs. Jones, let's make sure that your Bluetooth works on your car before you leave. Let's make sure your heated steering wheel leaves before you leave. And ladies and gentlemen, we've got to do a better job of QCing those vehicles. Ladies and gentlemen, service is going to be critical for a shop to thrive and not just survive. My question to you as OEMs, how do you know your OEM certified shops are giving good service? Because if they're not, they're going to give you a bad brand recognition. And here's the other thing I would tell the OEMs. Why don't you align yourself with whoever the major CSI provider is already in the industry? Because right now, as a customer, I'm getting 5 different CSI calls. I'm getting one from the customer. The customer, the body shop. A CSI call from the insurance carrier. A CSI call from the rental car company. A CSI call from the dealership. A CSI call from, the OEM brand. And here's the deal. With CSI, whoever calls first wins. Whoever calls last loses. Does that make sense to everybody? Give me an amen. Because you call me first, I'm going to give you a really good CSI. But by the time a 5th person calls me and says, were you satisfied? Were you kept informed? I have an attitude now. Does that make sense to everybody? Yes or no? So ladies and gentlemen, as OEMs, insurers, rental car companies, shops, we need to get together and streamline how many CSI calls that consumer is getting, because whoever calls first wins, whoever calls last loses. Last but all, second, speed. Here's the deal. I hear people always say, well, if they're fixing cars fast, they're hacking them out. Ladies and gentlemen, that is a myth. If you schedule properly, you're running a team system, you're running full production, you can be fixing cars fast and doing high quality work. Again, 2 to 4 days better than market average. Alrighty, this is some information that Enterprise shared with me, so shout out to Enterprise, right? This is the top 12 MSOs in North America based off of sales volume. Top 12 MSOs in North America based off of sales volume. You can see the average length of rental is 9 days. That's all in. That's drivable, non-drive, DRP, non-DRP. Ladies and gentlemen, if you're not hitting your cycle time and speed less than 9 days, you're losing the game, right? So we got to make sure we set ourselves up to win. Last but not least, accuracy. On-time delivery. Was the vehicle ready when promised? And number 2 was, did I have to return the vehicle back for any problems? QCing of a vehicle has to go up another notch. So here's the next thing I want to share with you, ladies and gentlemen. I have concern for our industry. So understand that the next 30 minutes, my comments are meant in love. My comments, the spirit of my heart is to speak the truth to you, to create awareness. So I'm not here to say anybody's right or wrong or pick sides. I just want to create awareness, because at the end of the day, all I care about is, do we do safe and proper repairs? So is everybody good with me? I like to do what I call talk straight. Is everybody okay with me talking straight? If so, raise your hands. All right, here we go. So one of the things I always ask people is, how many of you have fixed a Toyota or Lexus since 2010? Everybody raises their hands. And then I ask people, how many of you have written an estimate on or fixed a Toyota or Lexus since 2010? Raise your hands. Toyota or Lexus since 2000. How many of you work for an insurance carrier and or an insurance company and you said, we've actually written estimates on Toyotas or Lexuses? Raise your hands, right? And how many body shops have written estimates or fixed Toyota or Lexus? And everybody raises their hands. Did you know that since 2010, Toyota and Lexus say this in their bulletin? Perform the 0-point calibration if any of the following conditions is met. It says any, not 2 out of 3, not 3 out of 4. Toyota says if just one of these conditions occurs, you must perform a 0-point calibration, which requires the use of a factory scan tool. The vehicle is brought to the workshop for repair after an accident or a collision. You see, ladies and gentlemen, the way the airbags used to deploy in the past was the inertia forces would trigger a pendulum in the seatbelt. That would send a signal to the airbag sensor, the airbag would deploy. Well, Toyota, during early crash testing in the early 2000s, found out that people's bodies reacted differently based off of their weight. And in some cases, an airbag may not deploy because it didn't even sense that somebody was in the weight, because maybe it was a child safety seat or somebody weighed 80 pounds. So they started putting sensors in seats in order to help to detect if an occupant was in the vehicle to determine when the airbag should deploy. If I'm driving down the road and I'm in an accident, the seat sensor grabs a hold of my weight, 172 pounds. Let's say that the airbag does not deploy, but all of a sudden now I loan the car to my sister. She's driving down the road and she weighs 102 pounds and the vehicle's in an accident. The airbag's going to deploy based off of my 172 pounds because nobody went back and recalibrated that sensor. Does that make sense to everybody? Give me an amen. Amen. And ladies and gentlemen, after every accident, Toyota and Lexus very clearly since 2010 have said, even if the vehicle's unoccupied, even if nobody's in the vehicle, even if it's not even being driven, if it's in a collision, it must get a 0-point calibration. Now, it's not just Toyota that says that, by the way, ladies and gentlemen. And by the way, I would encourage you to stop by the Toyota booth because they're actually going to do a demonstration of this, I believe today. Is that right, Mr. Stella from Toyota? They're going to actually do a demonstration of what a 0-point calibration is, so you can understand it and understand why it's necessary, right? And here's the next thing, Honda. Honda says check the ODS unit operation after any of these actions, after a vehicle collision. Honda and Acura have said since 2010, every Honda and Acura must be hooked up to a factory scan tool and must get an ODS unit operation check, which you can only do with a factory scan tool. By the way, Hyundai says the same thing. ODS is utilizing a robust weight measuring technology. Thus, if any of the following conditions occurs, WCS reset and accuracy check should be performed. Bullet point number 2, the vehicle is brought to the repair shop due to an accident or crash, even though the severity seems to be minor. Now, ladies and gentlemen, if you're a body shop person, I love you. But we use the insurance companies as an excuse for our ignorance or lack of knowledge. Do I get an amen? Here's the first thing I do. I always ask people, let's ask right now, how many of you have ever fixed a Hyundai or a Kia? Raise your hands. How many of you have never charged for a WCS Recalibration, raise your hands. So did the insurance company not pay for it because they won't pay for it, or did they not pay for it because you didn't ask? Why? Because we didn't ask. Ladies and gentlemen, it's time as body shops, we quit using the insurance companies as an excuse for our ignorance and blaming people and saying they won't pay for this when the reality is we're not educated to ask. Is that a fair statement? If so, give me an amen. And ladies and gentlemen, we've got to be educated. Now here's the problem. OEMs, insurance companies, and all right, so body shops say, look, Hyundai says I need to do this, Toyota says I need to do it, Honda says I need to do it, I'm going to do it. Insurance companies now will say, you know what, well, that's not always necessary on every one, or there wasn't anybody in the vehicle, or there should only be a dash light, and half the service departments don't know what we're talking about. And now what happens is body shops and insurance companies, we're put at odds, and there's friction. OEMs, we need you to be a little bit more transparent. We need the OEMs to come out and be transparent and say, here's why you need to do that. And here are the parameters on why you need to do it and how you do it. And we've got to have those kind of discussions. And I got to tell you, ladies and gentlemen, I'm an American. And this is where I'm probably going to get in trouble. But this event, the positive vibe that I got here last night and today, as Americans, we can learn from you all. So I just want to give Mr. Jeffries and Leanne Jeffries a great big round of applause for just the positive event this is, right? But, you know, we could never have this kind of conversation in the U.S. Why? Because we'd start fighting after 5 minutes and nothing would ever get accomplished. It's just the truth, right? And I want to get mad and grab my crotch and touch somebody and, you know, and so what would happen? But ladies and gentlemen, you have the atmosphere to have these kind of conversations. And these are the kind of things we need to be thinking about, right? Let's look at this right here. This is a Kia. Kia says OCS is utilizing a robust weight measuring technology. Thus, if any of the following conditions occur, WCS reset and accuracy check should be performed, which can only be done with a factory scan tool, by the way. And what's it say? The vehicle is brought to the workshop due to an accident or crash, even though severity seems to be minor. So Toyota, Lexus, Hyundai, Kia, Honda Acura, they all tell me that since 2010, if any of their vehicles are in an accident, no matter how minor, they must be hooked up to a factory scan tool. Ladies and gentlemen, are you educated about these types of things? And if not, then where are we putting safety at in regards to our priorities in our business? Let's look right here. Check this out. So you heard me say we need to repair more, right? Repair versus replace. We need to repair more. Check this out. My good friend Jake Rodenroth from Collision Diagnostic Services brought this to my attention. This is a Mazda CX-7 with blind spot monitors. Mazda says in their data, you cannot repair a bumper cover using any putty application. So if you use any body filler or plastic repair filler material in the bumper, the blind spot monitors will not work properly. Is that something we need to know, yes or no? Yes or no? Let me show you another one here real quick. Look at this. This is a Chrysler 300. Check this out. If the vehicle has experienced any trauma in the outboard area at the end of the rear bumper, even if the fascia is not damaged, even if the bumper is not damaged, it says you still need to use a factory scan tool and go back and recalibrate the sensors. Even if the bumper is not damaged. If the vehicle has any type of impact on the rear of the vehicle. Now understand, ladies and gentlemen, I'm just the messenger. I'm just showing you what Chrysler says. Does everybody get that, yes or no? But at the end of the day, when are insurers and shops going to step up and start saying we need to put these things on our estimate? And if you don't feel it should be on there, when are you going to start consulting with the OEMs and say, educate me more about it? I'll give you another example right here. BMW. I know we got somebody from BMW here. Check this out. The complete adaptive cruise control sensor must be replaced when there is damage on the front end of the vehicle. That's a pretty damn broad statement. Would y'all agree with that? Yes or no? Yes or no? And then, ladies and gentlemen, are you doing these things? Do you know about it? Let me show you some other things. Jeep Cherokee. Check this out right here. It says at the very top, if the vehicle has experienced any trauma on the outboard area at each end of the rear fascia, behind the rear wheel openings, even if the fascia is not damaged, even if the bumper cover is not damaged, it says I must hook up to a factory scan tool. Ladies and gentlemen, are you doing that? And if you're not, who authorized you to make that decision in regards to safety on the vehicle? And if you're not doing it, are you not doing it because you're using the insurance company as an excuse, or you're not doing it because as an auto collision repairer, you weren't even aware of it? And I would have to say that if you own your stuff, the majority of people in this room will say, Mike, I wasn't even aware of this. How many people want to just own your shit right now and say, Mike, I didn't even know that? Raise your hands. Raise your hands. I want to see. Own your stuff, right? Raise your hands. Raise your hands up high, right? I want to see. So, ladies and gentlemen, we got to quit playing victim And we got to start choosing our destiny. We got to start educating ourselves. Look at this one right here. This is a Ford Fusion. Ford Fusion, look right here. There should be no, this comes right out of Ford's. There should be no bumper stickers or body filling material used on the rear side of the bumper cover. It is as SODL or SODR. How many times are we using body and plastic repair materials when we fix bumpers? And now all of a sudden maybe that sensor doesn't work, and now it doesn't detect there's a car in the lane, and I changed lanes, and now I hit another car. Or maybe it doesn't detect and I back over a little boy or a little girl. All because we did an improper repair, because we said we didn't have time to research the OEM information. Look right here. This is a Honda Pilot. Honda Pilot says special tools are required to complete the aiming process anytime you R&I a bumper that has blind spot monitors in it. They actually require a target and a factory scan tool. Ladies and gentlemen, I can tell you that by 2017, 2018, just about every car sold in North America is going to have either parking sensors or cameras in the back end, and they all require the utilization of a camera and factory targets to re-aim or recalibrate those cameras. But are we putting that on our estimates, and if not, why? And I'm saying it's because we're not educated. We're not aware. Torque to yield fasters. Anybody know what a torque to yield faster is? Torque to yield faster is when you take and you torque a bolt to specs and you go so many degrees past that and it stretches the threads. And it's one-time use. So I'm replacing a frame rail on a Ford Focus. And when I'm replacing that frame rail, I had to R&I the suspension. When I go to R&I the suspension, neither Mitchell nor Autotex told me that the bolt was a torque to yield faster. There was no footnote in Mitchell or Autotex. But I researched it through Ford's information, and Ford says bolts 1 and 3 are torque to yield. New nuts, bolts, and ball bearing washers must be installed, and here's the sequence I tighten them in and how many degrees I go to stretch the bolts. Had I not researched this, I would not have known. I would have put the old bolts back in. Would that have been a liability, yes or no? Yes or no? Yes. Whose responsibility is it, everybody, to research every single nut and bolt we figure out on a suspension job? Each of us as individuals. And ladies and gentlemen, that's not just shops, that's insurers. Insurers, in order for you to thrive and not just survive in the future, you need to mandate that your appraisers are researching OEM information just like us as shops. Because at the end of the day, our destinies are tied in together. Let's look right here. Fill in this blank for me. You cannot weld within how many inches of an electrical component? 12 to 18, depending on the OEM. Why is that? Because when you weld, electricity sends out electromagnetic pulse, et cetera, et cetera. Well, check this out. So I'm replacing a quarter panel on a Nissan Versa. In order to replace the quarter panel, I had to R&I the airbag up in the headliner. In order to R&I the airbag, I had to R&I the headliner. In order to R&I the headliner, I had to R&I the center pillar trim. And when I R&I the center pillar trim, I went to Nissan's OEM documentation, and I researched it, and Nissan said, warning, do not reuse center pillar upper garnish if removed. What does that mean I need to do, everybody? There was no note in Mitchell or Autotex. Had I not researched this, I would not have known. So what I'm telling you, ladies and gentlemen, is we don't know what we don't know. And insurers and shops, you must be researching every single vehicle. We write on an estimate through OEM information. Mercedes-Benz, little one here for you. You disconnect the battery on a Mercedes-Benz, you got to use a factory scan tool to go back and synchronize the air ducts. If not, the defroster vents don't work. So, ladies and gentlemen, how do we do that? Well, we have Mitchell's Tech Advisor, we have Autotex Tech Focus, and then we have third-party options where we can go directly to the OEM's websites, pay to play by the day, by the hour, by the week, by the month, or we can also use options like All Data. So let me just give you an example how this works. All the systems all work basically the same, but let me use All Data as an example, right? For example, in All Data, every single vehicle manufacturer has a section that says repairs and inspections required after a collision. Everybody say it out loud with me, please. Repairs. I feel like Whoopi Goldberg trying to get the choir to go. Let's try this again, all right? Everybody say this with me out loud, please. Repairs and inspections. Ladies and gentlemen, every OEM has a section like this. My question for you, if you're an insurer, you're a shop, are you mandating that your employees and your estimators, whether you're a shop or insurance company, are you researching these? Let me ask you a question. I'm a consumer. I go to you as an insurance carrier and ask you to write an estimate. Do you have an obligation to be looking this up? Yes or no? As a shop, do you have an obligation to look this up? Yes or no? Ladies and gentlemen, every OEM has a section that says repairs and inspections required after collision, and if we're not looking that up, we don't know what we don't know. I'll give you an example. This was something on a Ford Explorer. They had 14 pages of things that I'm supposed to inspect if a Ford Explorer is in an accident. And 5 of the things on those 14 pages require the use of a factory scan tool. Just saying, right? Also, Toyota Tundra. This one here had 17 pages of things I'm supposed to inspect if a Toyota Tundra is in an accident. But if I'm not looking this up, ladies and gentlemen, who am I passed off my liability to? So here's what we need to understand. Let's say I'm using all data. All data, and I'm not here to endorse all data, I'm using all data as an example. All data integrates with the estimating systems. When it integrates, it has a data pump and it grabs your estimates. I will select my estimate, for example, Volkswagen Touareg. I will select that estimate, and then what happens is all data scrubs or analyzes my estimate, and it looks at all the words and all the verbiage on my estimate. And then what it does is it alerts me and says, hey, Mike, here's some things that the OEM says might be important to you. So every one of these icons means something. So for example, on this Volkswagen Touareg, I put on this here to repair the left aperture panel. All data says, hey, there's something Volkswagen wants you to know. I click on that icon, and it came back and told me it was made out of boron steel and it cannot be repaired, it must be replaced. And then it actually goes further and tells me I need specific adhesive. And then I go down here and I say, okay, well, I'm going to replace the door on this Volkswagen Touareg. All data comes back and says, hey, there's something Volkswagen says you need to know about the door. I click on it, and Volkswagen says right here, when you replace the door, drive the window regulator up and down until the limit stops twice. By doing this, the window regulator motor is normed and ready for operation and activates pinch protection. That's if a little boy or girl sticks their arm out the window, doesn't roll up on them. Does that make sense to everybody? If so, give me an amen. At the end of the day, ladies and gentlemen, had all data not brought this to my attention, I would not have known. And if I would not have known, I would have done an improper repair. But ladies and gentlemen, at the end of the day, what we need to understand is this. If you do not have the word on your estimate, then all data, Mitchell, or Autotext cannot pick up on the word and come back and alert you to what you need to do. That's a very important point. Does everybody get that? Yes or no? Yes or no? See, a lot of insurance carriers will say, well, if it's included, delete it off the estimates. Too many lines. Well, ladies and gentlemen, if I delete it, even if it's included, I delete it, and now it prohibits the ability of all data or any other third-party software to bring to my attention whether that's a one-time use part or what I need to know. Does that make sense to everybody? If so, give me an amen. And if we don't do 100% teardown and we don't have these words on our estimate, because these words are what it looks at, and that's what it brings to my attention. And ladies and gentlemen, these are the things that we need to start doing as both insurers and collision repairers to ensure we're doing a safe and proper repair. Remember, if it's based on if you're an insurance carrier and you're judging shops by how many lines are on the estimate, that's old school mentality. They've got to put those things on there even if it's included, because that's the only way the third-party software is going to alert them to what it takes to a safe and proper repair. Is everybody good with that? Give me an amen. All right, good deal. Now here's the next thing I need to share with you. This one of the biggest myths in the world is that as long as there's no dash lights on the vehicle, we're A-okay. Ladies and gentlemen, that's a myth straight from the pits of hell. Telling you right now, ladies and gentlemen, that is inaccurate. First of all, a lot of your vehicles must be driven X amount of miles in order to trigger a dash light. And if the vehicle's in an accident and it gets towed to you, it was never driven to trigger the dash light. Number two, some vehicles must have the key turned on or off, on and off, which we call key cycle, in order to trigger a dash light. And again, if it gets driven to you or towed to you, maybe the key was not turned on and off enough. And last but not least, ladies and gentlemen, there are no dash warning lights for the majority of these accident avoidance features as well as comfort features. There is no dash light that tells you that your Bluetooth doesn't work with your phone. There is no dash light that tells you that your adaptive cruise control is not working. So, ladies and gentlemen, I will tell you this. In my opinion, and I believe this, I can prove this factually to you, you must scan every single vehicle before you take it apart and after. Now, I know with some insurers, you're going to say, oh my God, Mike, that's overkill. That's just too much. Ladies and gentlemen, I'm going to show you proof today of why you need to scan every single vehicle before you dismantle it and after you reassemble it, all right? First of all, we need to understand that dash lights are not diagnostics. They do not diagnose damage. They just alert you to mostly mechanical maintenance issues. Number two is they may not illuminate until the vehicle's driven X amount of miles. So what we need to understand is also that some vehicles, they will actually disable some functions on the vehicle when there's a problem. And if we don't scan it, we will not know that that system's been disabled. So, let me just show you a couple things in the essence of time, right? First of all, an F-22 Raptor fighter jet has 1.7 million lines of code in it. A Boeing 787 Dreamliner has 6.5 million lines of code in it. A Chevy Volt has 10 million lines of code in it. Ladies and gentlemen, I don't know if that makes me scared as shit to fly or makes me feel good about cars. But at the end of the day, ladies and gentlemen, we are working on a vehicle that is more complex than a fighter jet or an aircraft that would fly you nonstop to London. Does everybody get that, yes or no? And ladies and gentlemen, we've got to start accepting our responsibilities as well as our liabilities a little bit more serious. So, first of all, what's the big thing right now? Pedestrian detection, right? A lot of pedestrians are killed. So what you're doing is see the automobile manufacturers come up with more safety features to prevent us from hitting pedestrians, right? So you're going to see a whole lot more adaptive features in order using radar, sensors of that nature. And that's why scan tools are going to become really, really important. We also, what's another cause of accidents and death is people getting drowsy or falling asleep. The new Mercedes, you're driving down the road, it actually will have a little coffee cup that illuminates on your dash. That's a drowsiness alert. What does that mean? It causes the steering wheel to vibrate, the seat vibrates, and the seatbelt tightens on you because it's focusing on your head movement and the movement of your eyes. So it alerts you that you're falling asleep before you have an accident, right? How are we going to quality control and inspect these things to make sure they work properly after we do a repair? So again, in the essence of time, I'm skipping through this a little bit, right? All right, let me give you an example right here. This was a BMW, 2010 BMW. Came into a body shop I was working at called North Haven Auto Body in North Haven, Connecticut. No dash lights on the dash. 0 dash lights, car came in, headlights were busted out, core support. Typically, we would have wrote an estimate, figured headlights, ordered the headlights, replaced them, replaced the core support, and then the headlights wouldn't have worked, and then we'd have shipped it to the dealership, and we'd have lost 2 or 3 days in rental, right? But I scanned this vehicle with a BMW factory scan tool during the drop-off process. And there were no warning lights on this dash. And when I scanned it, it came back and said there were 25 computers with 12 codes stored in 4 modules. And because it had freeze frame data, every single one of these right here was from the accident. So understand this. There were no warning lights on this dash. No warning lights. I scanned it, and it came back and said there were 25 computers with 12 codes stored in 4 modules, and all 12 of those codes that were fault codes were all from the accident. And one of them told me that the adaptive headlight control module was bad. I was able to pre-order it during the 100% teardown, one teardown, one parts order. I was able to order it and reprogram it and deliver the vehicle on time because I was able to identify and diagnose in the beginning that I needed that. Does that make sense to everybody? If so, give me an amen. Right? Let me give you another example. This was a Ford Fusion. Check this out. Ford Fusion, no warning lights on the dash. 0 warning lights on the dash. I go and scan the vehicle. 31 computers with 113 fault codes stored in the system. No warning lights on the dash. 113 fault codes. And guess what? They were all accident related, ladies and gentlemen. Every single one of them, and there was no dash warning light on the dash. This is a Honda Civic. Car got towed in from the scene of an accident. No warning lights on the dash. We scanned it. Said there were 6 computers with 4 codes stored in 2 modules. And then one of them was there was no signal from the left front bumper impact sensor. The left front airbag sensor was bad, ladies and gentlemen, and there was no warning light on the dash. Now, if the lady would have picked it up and drove it home, it probably would have triggered it eventually. But what would have happened in that time frame when she didn't? And then how would that have impacted my CSI? And how would that have impacted my on-time delivery? Had we not scanned in the beginning, ladies and gentlemen, we would not have known that. Let me show you another one right here. Jim Shurtleff from, where's Jim Shurtleff at? Jim, stand up for a minute. Is Jim here? Jim Shurtleff? Jim. Everybody give Jim a big round of applause, everybody. This right here, this vehicle right here was from Jim's shop. This was a Mercedes-Benz that came into Jim's shop. Had 9,601 miles on it. We scanned the vehicle with an Aztec, which is here at your vendor expo. Scanned this Mercedes-Benz. No warning lights on the dash. 23 computers reported 50 codes stored in 17 modules. And every single one of these was from the accident. And a Jim shop not scanned this vehicle beforehand on this Mercedes, they would have known any of these conditions existed, and it would have been an improper repair. Ladies and gentlemen, here's another Mercedes-Benz that we scanned it. Here's a Toyota Matrix. No warning lights on the dash. We scanned it. 10 computers, 2 codes stored in 2 modules. One of them was the rear speed sensor was bad. It wasn't bad. You know what the problem was? When the technician put sprayable seam sealer on the wheelhouse, he got overspray on there, and the speed sensor wasn't working. Had we not scanned the vehicle as part of the QC process, we would not have known that the speed sensor was bad. All right, so here, let me give you an example. This is an Audi Q7. Mark Allen, is Mark Allen here? Mark Allen from Audi. Anybody from Audi here, please stand up. Hey, Mark, appreciate you, love you, brother, right? So check this one out. So insurers, now here's the insurers. They're like, well, my God, man, if we got to pay to scan every car, that's going to cost a lot of money, and this is crazy. Let me show you insurers how it would help you. This was an Audi Q7 that came into the shop. All it got was a rear bumper cover. That was it. That's all it got. Customer came in and said, my navigation unit has not worked since the accident. No warning lights on the dash. So what we did is we hooked it up to an Audi factory scan tool. We scanned it with an Audi factory scan tool, and Audis are awesome because they have freeze frame data. That tells you the date, time, mileage the code occurred. Look what Audi's scan tool told us. Audi told us that the navigation unit fault codes were recorded 8,954 miles in 7 months prior to the date of loss. Liar, liar, pants on fire. So yes, it was a legitimate problem, but we were able to prove that it was not due to the accident. We saved the insurance company over $1,500. Is that a win for everybody, yes or no? I gotta tell you a funny story. So I'm in this shop, and this shop puts a bumper cover on a Volkswagen. The lady picks her car up at 4:30 on a Thursday, and she comes back on Friday, and she says, my radio doesn't work since y'all fixed my car. How many of y'all ever heard some shit like that before, right? So anyway, so we're like, okay, ma'am, well, let's pull it in and take a look at it. So we hook it up to a Volkswagen factory scan tool, and it says that at 9:37 p.m. that night, somebody plugged an incompatible device into the USB port on her dash, and that locked up her radio. At 9:37 p.m. on Thursday night, she picked the car up from us at 4:30. Does that make sense to everybody? So I went out to her very calmly, and I said, ma'am, I've got good news and bad news. She said, what's that? I said, the good news is, ma'am, we fixed your radio. It was a fault code. We cleared it. It's fixed. She said, what's the bad news? The bad news is your car said you're a liar. I really didn't say that, but it sounds cool as shit, don't it? How many of y'all like to say some stuff like that, right? Liar, right? Just grabbed my crotch, twitched my neck, and touched her, right? So at the end of the day, ladies and gentlemen, I got to tell you, instead of sitting here and saying, I can't scan every vehicle, that'll cost too much, we need to start having discussions about, instead of saying I can't, we got to start having discussions saying, how can I? How can I do it in a way that's cost effective to the insurance company that doesn't total out every vehicle, but how can I do it to also protect myself from liability, ladies and gentlemen? I will tell you, I personally scanned over 1,000 vehicles last year myself. And I will tell you that 96% of them all had problems from the accident or the repair process that had nothing that we would not have known had we not scanned them. Let me give you another example here very quickly, right? This was a Toyota Camry. So this car comes into a shop. All it got was a bumper cover, a grill, and a grill emblem. The shop painted the bumper cover off the car. Lady came back. They put the bumper cover on while she waited. Grill emblem on it. She drove down the road. She came back about 10 minutes later, and she said, something's wrong with my gas pedal. Something's wrong. It's not acting right. My engine's acting funny. Shop owner test drove it. Sure enough, he's like, my God, all we did was put a bumper cover on it and a grill emblem. No warning lights on the dash. Scan it with a Toyota factory scan tool, came back with a fault code for the adaptive cruise control. They did not mirror match the grill emblem, and they put a charcoal gray one on it instead of a clear one. Couldn't get a consistent signal, and it was causing the cruise control to engage and disengage. That could have been a huge liability, ladies and gentlemen, because they did not mirror match the grill emblem. Had they scanned that before the vehicle left the premises as part of the QC process, they would have been aware of that. Does that make sense to everybody? If so, give me an amen. Ladies and gentlemen, I like what Mr. Jeffrey said earlier. We're not fixing our grandfathers and uncles and great-grandparents' cars anymore, ladies and gentlemen. We're fixing a very highly complex computerized device that has over 120 million lines of code in it, decision-making process, more than a fighter jet or a Dreamliner jet that takes you to the UK nonstop, right? Now, here's another thing you need to understand. The majority of domestic vehicles, GMs, Ford, and Chryslers, if you R&I a door handle and a mirror and you drive it to the paint shop, and all of a sudden you come back and now you put the door handle mirror back on it, it actually triggers a fault code called low voltage drop to the door handle mirror and will store a voltage drop. And I don't know how to avoid it, right? Everybody says we use memory savers. That doesn't work. Let me give you an example, right? This was a Dodge Nitro. We scanned it when the vehicle came in with a factory scan tool, and there were no fault codes in any of the modules. Had 100% what we call a clean bill of health. We R&I'd the door handle on the mirror because we put a fender on it and blended the door. We scanned it after we put it back together, and it came back, so there's 9 computers with 2 fault codes stored in 2 modules. And what it was low voltage drop. I will tell you right now, ladies and gentlemen, 90% of all vehicles today that you replace a windshield in, if that's all you did was replace a windshield, nothing else, it's going to store a fault code when it disconnects from that rearview mirror because it has low voltage drop and it breaks the current. And what happens is you have to go back and recalibrate that, or some of your rain sensors won't work. Some of your adaptive cameras will not work, all when you just go to replace a windshield. All right? By the way, there's a vendor here called Collision Diagnostic Services, CDS. They have a tool that's called the Aztec. Here's the deal. As a shop, you cannot afford to buy every single factory scan tool. It costs you over $500,000. And I will tell you, aftermarket scan tools are not the same as an OEM. I have personally scanned vehicles with OEM scan tools that other people scan with aftermarket scan tools, and I found things they did not. So I would tell you, you have to use an OEM scan tool. Aftermarket does not cut it. But again, if you had to go out and buy every scan tool for OEMs, it costs you $500,000. I would encourage you to stop by, and I don't work for them. I'm just telling you, I have my own. I own my own unit, CDS Aztec unit. They actually have a device that connects to the internet, goes to Dallas, Texas, and in Dallas, Texas, they have factory scan tools. So anything that the dealership could do for you, they can now do virtually over the internet, so you can do it in real time. Does that make sense to everyone, yes or no? Ladies and gentlemen, the technology exists for us now through internet to access factory scan tools. There's no excuse for us not being able to scan a vehicle before and scan a vehicle after. I would encourage you at one of your future conferences, maybe you consider having Jake Rodenroth come in and speak to you about a lot of the things I'm telling you about, ladies and gentlemen. We don't know what we don't know. All right, here's the other thing, comfort features. I'll give you an example. Jake, my good friend. Jake, are you here? Jake anywhere? Kid. So let me give you an example. Or Jake, he's over there. Everybody say, hey, Jake. We always ask you like he's Jake from State Farm. What are you wearing, Jake? You got khakis on? So Jake was at a shop in Pennsylvania. All this shop did was fix a bumper cover on a Mercedes-Benz. It was a Mercedes-Benz convertible. All they did was repair the rear bumper cover. Am I right, Jake? Repair the rear bumper cover. And the headrest deployed because it was convertible when the vehicle got hit. So they reset the headrest, repaired and refinished the bumper cover. No warning lights on a dash. And they scanned it, and it came back and said there was a fault code that the air scarf system did not work. Now, who knows what an air scarf system is? Raise your hands. So can you share with everybody what an air scarf system is, sir? Yep. Right, no, so an air scarf system actually blows air out on your neck, so it keeps you cool, right? Here's the deal, ladies and gentlemen. Let's say that air scarf system was really important to that lady that bought that Mercedes. That's the biggest reason she bought it was the air scarf system. First of all, I didn't know what the hell an air scarf system was, right? But at the end of the day, had they not scanned it, they would not have known it wasn't working, and they would not have known before they delivered the vehicle. Does that make sense? By the way, you know what the problem was? A Trident gun wrapper was stuck down inside there. Am I right, Jake? Ladies and gentlemen, we don't know what we don't know. How are you checking these comfort features out on the vehicles when you QC them? How are you making sure that heated steering wheel works? How are you making sure that all the adaptive cruise control systems work? Ladies and gentlemen, we have to know all of these things, right? So, one of the things as I kind of get ready to wrap this up, recently in the United States, 2 days ago, we celebrated the anniversary of the space shuttle crashing. Does everybody remember when the space shuttle crashed? Right. Does anybody remember why it crashed? An O-ring. So here's the deal. They had an O-ring that did not, when it got to a certain temperature, the O-ring did not seal properly. It was brittle, and it allowed the fuel to bypass and create an explosion. Now, when they went and they investigated NASA, they found out that people at NASA knew the O-ring was bad. They knew the O-ring was defective. But they didn't say anything, and the reason they didn't say anything is because NASA had missed their launch date 3 times, and they'd gone over budget. So they had a big meeting. They said, we've got to launch on this date, and we cannot go over budget anymore. So they launched on time, and they didn't go over budget, and people died. You see, ladies and gentlemen, there was even an article they even put about it. It said NASA's habit of relaxing safety standards to meet financial and time constraints set the stage for the February 1st loss of the Space Shuttle Columbia and its 7 astronauts. And they warned that the agency's broken safety culture would lead to tragedy again unless fundamental changes are made. Unless fundamental changes are made. You see, ladies and gentlemen, in our industry, we don't call it launch date, we call it cycle time. We don't call it budget, we call it severity. And I understand, ladies and gentlemen, that those things are important. In the United States, State Farm spends $48 million a day just for 1 day of rental car cost. So I get severity. I get cycle time. I get it. But ladies and gentlemen, insurers and shops, safety should always trump severity and cycle time. It should always trump it. And ladies and gentlemen, what concerns me, and I'm being transparent, I mean this in love, is as an industry, we need to all lay down our swords. We need to all lay down our swords. Insurance companies, there's no reason that your staff appraisers should not be using a third-party integration solution like All Data to scrub the estimate and inspecting repairs and inspections required for collision. There's no reason you shouldn't be able to do that. There's no reason shops, you should not be indeed done every single one. OEM manufacturers, there's no reason you should not be getting a push report from these third-party companies that says how many times people researched and what they researched. Ladies and gentlemen, it's time we start utilizing technology. We all become very, very transparent. Because at the end of the day, if a car's not fixed properly and somebody dies in an accident, we all are going to be guilty. We will all be guilty. We will all stand before that judge, right? We're in this together, ladies and gentlemen. OEMs, be transparent. Don't just throw something out there and say 0-point calibration is going to be on every car. Let's have intelligent conversations as to why it needs to be done. That's why I applaud Toyota for what they're doing at their booth. So, ladies and gentlemen, here's what I got to tell you. I think we need to think safety first. At the end of the day, we need to take personal responsibility. You know, ladies and gentlemen, again, I'm from the United States of America, and I got to tell you, I think in the United States of America, and for my fellow Americans here, I don't know what you'll say, but I think our country is going to hell. I think our country has gone downhill. Why? Because everybody in the United States wants to play victim. We want to blame everybody for our problems, right? We want to blame our race. We want to blame the government. We want to blame everybody, our color, our size. We want to blame everybody else. We don't want to own our shit, right? And until we quit, blaming victim on everybody and start playing victim and start accepting our personal responsibility of the choices we make, that's when our life and our country will get back great again, right? But ladies and gentlemen, I know my time's up. I hope you got value. I know it was a big brain dump. I've got some business cards. I'll be here about lunch, and then I got to head out to Michigan. But I just want to say it truly was on my bucket list. God bless you, and thank you for the opportunity to speak to you today. Thank you, sir. Thank you. Thank you so much, sir.
That certainly gave us a lot to think about. We truly do need to focus, the insurers and the shops, on being transparent, sharing this data with us. That's probably as clear a message as you're going to get.